Black maid's loyalty was tested by billionaire boss by leaving the safe box with millions of dollars open. When Asha Williams walked into the billionaire's study that Saturday morning, she never imagined her integrity would be worth more than the $60,000 in cash staring back at her from an open safe. A single mother cleaning houses to survive, she faced an impossible choice: take the money her sick daughter desperately needed, or prove that desperation doesn't always destroy dignity. But James Pemberton's test of her character would backfire in ways he never expected. Because while he was busy judging whether a poor black woman could resist temptation, she was quietly showing him something he'd forgotten how to find: genuine human connection. Sometimes the person you're testing ends up teaching you the most important lesson of all: that real love begins when you stop measuring people by their bank accounts and start seeing them for who they truly are. Before I continue with this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments where you are currently watching from. The alarm buzzed at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Asha Williams needed it to, but she was already awake, staring at the water stain on her ceiling that looked like a question mark. She rolled from the narrow bed in her studio apartment, feet finding the cold linoleum, and moved through her morning routine with practiced efficiency. Coffee first, the cheap kind that tasted like burnt disappointment but delivered caffeine. Then the shower, exactly 4 minutes to conserve hot water. Her work uniform hung pressed and ready: black slacks, white button-down, comfortable shoes that wouldn't betray her after 12 hours on marble floors. In the mirror, Asha saw what the world saw: a 32-year-old black woman with tired eyes and calloused hands, invisible to most except when they needed something cleaned, fixed, or forgotten. She tied her hair back, applied minimal makeup, and checked her phone. One missed call from Maya's school. Her 8-year-old daughter's persistent cough had the nurse concerned. The train ride to the Upper East Side took 43 minutes, enough time for Asha to review her mental checklist. She'd been cleaning for the Pemberton family for 6 months, long enough to know that Mr. James Pemberton preferred his coffee at exactly 180 degrees, that he read 3 newspapers each morning, and that he never looked directly at her when giving instructions. She emerged from the subway into a different world, one where dog walkers earned more per hour than she did, where doormen nodded respectfully at her employer badge, where her presence was both necessary and unwelcome. The Pemberton penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering views that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Asha used her key, disarmed the security system with her assigned code, and stepped into silence that felt heavy with judgment. Across town, James Pemberton finished his morning run in Central Park, sweat mixing with the October chill as he checked his fitness tracker. 7 miles in 42 minutes, not his best time, but acceptable for a 40-year-old who spent most days behind a desk moving millions of other people's dollars around financial markets. He walked through his empty penthouse, noting details with the same analytical precision he applied to quarterly reports. The cleaning woman, Alice, would arrive soon, and he had a board meeting at 9 that would determine whether the Meridian acquisition moved forward. James poured himself coffee from the machine that cost more than most people's rent and opened his laptop to review overnight market movements. The Asian markets had closed higher, European futures looked promising, and his personal portfolio had gained another $2 million while he slept. At 38, he controlled a hedge fund worth $3.2 billion, owned properties on 3 continents, and could buy whatever he wanted except the one thing that seemed increasingly elusive: someone who saw him as more than a bank account with legs. His last relationship had ended 8 months ago when he discovered Victoria discussing his net worth with her friends, calculating how much she might receive in a divorce settlement from a man she hadn't even married yet. Since then, he'd retreated further into the armor of wealth, testing everyone's motives, trusting no one's intentions. James checked his watch, 8:15 a.m. The cleaning woman would be here in 15 minutes, invisible and efficient, like all the service people who moved through his life maintaining the illusion that wealth was effortless. He had decisions to make today, including one that would test whether his instincts about human nature were as sharp as his financial ones. Asha entered the penthouse to find Mr. Pemberton standing by the windows, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing sharply as he spoke in clipped sentences about leverage ratios and market volatility. She moved quietly to the supply closet, gathered her materials, and began her routine. She started with the kitchen, wiping down granite countertops that could fund her daughter's college education, organizing a refrigerator stocked with imported foods she couldn't pronounce. Through the doorway, she could see him pacing, his expensive suit perfectly tailored, his dark hair slightly mussed from his morning run. In 6 months, they'd exchanged perhaps 50 words total. He left her payment on the kitchen counter each Friday, always exact, never with a note, never with acknowledgement of the personal touches she added. Fresh flowers arranged just so, books straightened with care, the way she cleaned his reading glasses without being asked. "The cleaning woman is here," she heard him say into the phone, and something about his tone made her hands still on the coffee machine she was cleaning. Not dismissive exactly, but distant, as if she were furniture that happened to move. Asha had developed thick skin working in houses like this, but something about his casual reduction of her existence stung more than usual. Maybe it was the missed call from Maya's school, or the stack of bills on her kitchen table, or the way her reflection in his spotless windows looked small and temporary. She finished the kitchen and moved toward the living room, where he'd ended his call and now sat reviewing documents, reading glasses perched on his nose, completely absorbed in numbers that represented more money than she'd seen in several lifetimes. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to move through the world with that kind of confidence, that certainty that everything would bend to accommodate your needs. Then she picked up her cleaning supplies and got back to work, invisible and efficient, just as expected. Neither of them knew that in 3 hours, everything would change with the turn of a dial and the soft click of a safe door swinging open. The call came at 11:23 a.m., just as Asha was dusting the bookshelves in James's study. She heard his voice change from its usual controlled tone to something sharper, more urgent. "What do you mean by emergency board meeting?" He was pacing again, faster now. "The Seoul markets don't close for another. No, I understand the implications." Asha continued her work, moving her cloth in careful circles around leather-bound books that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She'd learned to make herself even more invisible during his business calls, understanding that the wrong overheard information could cost her this job. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, James said, ending the call with a sharp tap. She heard his footsteps approaching the study and instinctively stepped to the side, creating a clear path to his desk. He burst through the doorway, already pulling on his suit jacket, then stopped abruptly when he saw her there. For the first time in 6 months, his eyes met hers directly, not looking through her or past her, but at her. The contact lasted only a second, but something flickered across his face that she couldn't quite read. "I have to leave," he said, more to himself than to her. "Emergency at the office." Asha nodded and continued dusting, but she could feel him still standing there, his presence filling the doorway. In her peripheral vision, she saw him run a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling. "The safe," he said suddenly, and she turned to look at him fully. He was staring at the wall-mounted safe behind his desk, its heavy steel door currently closed. There are documents." He moved to the safe, his fingers flying over the digital keypad. 9 beeps, then a soft mechanical, whereas the locks disengaged. The door swung open with a whisper. Asha tried not to look, but the open safe was directly in her line of sight as she worked. Inside, she caught glimpses of thick manila folders, what appeared to be legal documents, and, her breath caught, neat stacks of cash. Not just bills, but serious money. Hundreds, maybe thousands of hundreds, bound with bank bands. James grabbed a single folder from the top shelf, scanning its contents quickly. His phone buzzed again, and he answered without checking the caller ID. "I'm leaving now," he said into the phone, tucking the folder under his arm. "The acquisition papers are—" "Yes, I have them." He ended the call and turned toward the door, then stopped. His eyes went to the open safe, then to Asha, who was now frozen with her cleaning cloth halfway to a picture frame, trying to pretend she hadn't seen anything. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Asha could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the expensive cologne he wore mixed with the faint scent of his morning coffee. The autumn light streaming through the windows seemed to dim, as if the world itself was holding its attention. "I have to go," he said again, but didn't move. His gaze flicked from her face to the safe, then back again. Something was calculating behind his eyes, a decision being weighed in real time. Asha set down her cloth and took a small step back, suddenly aware of how alone they were in this room, how isolated she was in this tower of wealth and power. Do you want me to come back later?" she asked quietly. "No," he said too quickly. Then more slowly, "No, continue with your work." But he still didn't move to close the safe. The moment stretched impossibly long. Asha could see him thinking, could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. She'd been around wealthy people long enough to recognize the look of someone making a calculation, weighing risk against potential gain. His phone buzzed again, breaking the spell. He glanced at the screen, then back at her one more time. When he spoke, his voice carried a strange quality she'd never heard before, almost conversational, as if they were equals having a normal discussion. "I'll be back this afternoon," he said. "Please finish the last part of the study today." Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway, the front door closing with a solid thunk that seemed to reverberate through the entire penthouse. Asha stood alone in the study, staring at the open safe. Inside, she could now see more clearly, at least 6 thick stacks of hundreds, each bound with a bank band marked $10,000. Legal documents with official seals. What looked like stock certificates or bonds. And in the back, a small black velvet box that probably contained jewelry worth more than her annual salary. $60,000. Maybe more. Just sitting there unguarded, while she, a woman who'd checked her bank balance 3 times this morning and winced each time, stood close enough to touch it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maya's school. "Please call regarding Maya's cough. We may need to send her home early." Asha stared at the message, then at the money, then at her phone again. Maya's medical bills from last month's emergency room visit were still unpaid. The electricity bill was overdue. Her car needed repairs she couldn't afford, and without it, she couldn't get to work. She took a step closer to the safe, then stopped. Her reflection in the black screen of James's computer monitor showed a woman caught between desperation and something else, something that looked like dignity, though dignity wouldn't pay for her daughter's medicine. The safe door hung open like a question, waiting for her answer. Asha's hands trembled as she gripped the cleaning cloth, her knuckles white against the yellow fabric. She forced herself to turn away from the safe, focusing instead on the mahogany desk that needed dusting, the leather chair that required attention, anything except the open vault of money behind her. He left it open on purpose. The thought arrived unbidden, settling in her stomach like a stone. In 6 months of working here, James Pemberton had never forgotten anything. Not his coffee temperature, not his preferred newspaper arrangement, not the exact way he liked his shirts organized by color and season. A man who controlled billions of dollars didn't accidentally leave 60,000 in cash exposed. She moved methodically around the room, her routine keeping her hands busy while her mind raced. The picture frames received unnecessary attention, their already spotless glass getting polished to perfection. The bookshelf got dusted twice, all while that safe hung open behind her like an accusation waiting to be proven. Her phone buzzed again. Maya's school. "Mrs. Williams? This is Nurse Patterson. Maya's cough has worsened, and she's running a fever. We really need someone to pick her up." Asha closed her eyes. My shift doesn't end until 4. Can you give her some children's Tylenol and let her rest in your office?" "I'm sorry, but our policy requires." "Please," Asha said, the word coming out smaller than she intended. "I can't lose this job." A pause. "I understand. We'll make an exception this time, but if she's not better tomorrow, she'll need to see a doctor." "A doctor?" Asha's insurance had a $500 deductible she couldn't meet. Maya had been fighting this cough for 2 weeks, and the over-the-counter medicines weren't helping anymore. She ended the call and found herself staring at the safe again. $500. That's just half of one stack. The rationalization appeared so smoothly it frightened her. She backed away from the desk, bumping into the bookshelf hard enough to make the leather volumes shift. One fell to the floor, a heavy tome about financial theory that probably cost more than she made in a week. As she bent to retrieve it, she noticed something else. A small security camera in the corner of the room, its red light blinking steadily. Her blood turned to ice water. Of course there are cameras. She'd been so focused on the moral test, she'd forgotten the practical reality. Everything was being recorded. Every move she made, every second she spent looking at that money, every moment of hesitation, all of it captured in high definition for James Pemberton to review later. The book felt heavy in her hands as she placed it back on the shelf. James wasn't just testing her honesty, he was documenting her response. The safe wasn't an opportunity, it was a trap with a digital witness. Asha's anger flared hot and sudden. How dare he? How dare he dangle financial relief in front of a struggling single mother just to see if she'd bite? How dare he reduce her to a subject in his little experiment about human nature? She grabbed her cleaning supplies and moved to the next room with more force than necessary, her bucket clanking against the doorframe. In the living room, she attacked the already pristine coffee table with renewed vigor, scrubbing at imaginary stains while fury coursed through her veins. The man had everything, more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, properties around the world, the kind of security that let him sleep soundly knowing tomorrow would bring more wealth. And here he was, testing whether a woman earning $20 an hour would steal from him to pay for her child's medical care. But even as anger sustained her, doubt crept in around the edges. What if she was wrong? What if it really was an accident, a moment of distraction caused by his emergency call? What if she was attributing malicious intent to simple human error? The possibility made her feel worse, not better. If he'd genuinely forgotten to close the safe, then her anger was misplaced. But if he'd left it open deliberately, then her anger wasn't nearly big enough. She found herself back in the hallway outside the study, cleaning supplies in hand, staring at the doorway. The smart thing would be to avoid the room entirely, to leave the safe untouched and unacknowledged. But part of her, the part that had been invisible and underestimated her entire life, wanted to march in there and close the safe herself, and wanted to deprive him of whatever satisfaction he thought he'd gain from this test. But what if closing it is part of the test too? Asha set down her bucket and pressed her palms against her temples. Every choice felt like a trap. Ignore the safe, and maybe he'd think she was negligent. Close it, and maybe he'd assume she was hiding something. Take the money, and prove whatever ugly assumptions he already held about people like her. Her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. Rent is 3 days late. Need payment by the end of the week, or we'll need to discuss other arrangements. She stared at the message until the words blurred. Other arrangements. Eviction. She and Maya homeless because Asha was too proud to take money that was just sitting there, uncounted, probably unnoticed in the grand scheme of James Pemberton's vast fortune. The sound of the elevator chiming made her freeze. Footsteps in the hallway, heavy, purposeful, familiar. He was back early. Asha grabbed her cleaning supplies and ducked into the guest bathroom, her heart hammering against her ribs. She heard his voice, speaking to someone on the phone as he walked through the penthouse. "Yes, I have the documents," he was saying. The meeting went better than expected. His footsteps paused outside the study. Asha held her breath, straining to hear any reaction to the open safe. But there was only silence, then the soft sound of his office chair rolling across the hardwood floor. He was in there now, with the safe, with the money, with whatever evidence the cameras had collected of her internal struggle. The sound that changed everything was subtle, a soft electronic beep followed by mechanical clicking, then silence. Asha recognized it immediately, the safe door closing, the locks engaging. From her hiding spot in the guest bathroom, she exhaled slowly, realizing she'd been holding her breath. She waited another full minute before emerging, hoping to slip out of the study wing entirely and focus on cleaning the kitchen. But as she stepped into the hallway, James appeared in the doorway of his study, no longer on the phone, his expression unreadable. "Asha," he said, and she was startled at hearing her name. In 6 months, he'd never used it before, had probably never bothered to learn it until today. "Yes, Mr. Pemberton? Could you step in here for a moment?" It wasn't really a question. Asha set down her cleaning supplies and followed him into the study, her mouth dry as desert sand. The safe was closed now, its digital display showing a steady green light. No evidence remained of the test, if that's what it had been. James sat behind his desk, but didn't gesture for her to sit in the chair across from him. The power dynamic remained clear: employer and employee, standing and sitting, questioned and questioner. "How long have you worked for me?" he asked. 6 months, sir." "And in that time, have you ever noticed anything unusual about this room?" Asha's pulse quickened. Was this how it would happen? A careful interrogation designed to trap her in a lie. "Unusual how, sir?" "Anything out of place. Anything that might concern you." She chose her words carefully. "No, sir. Everything always seems to be exactly where you left it." He studied her face with the same intensity she'd seen him apply to financial reports. "I had to leave quickly today. Emergency at the office." Sometimes, in moments like that, we forget things. Important things. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Asha understood that this was the moment: confession, denial, or deflection. She chose honesty, but not the kind he was fishing for. "If you're worried about forgetting something important, I can help you develop a checklist," she said quietly. "I do that with my daughter when she's rushing to get ready for school." Something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe, or disappointment that she hadn't taken the bait. His phone rang, the sharp sound cutting through the tension. He glanced at the caller ID, frowned, and answered. "Pemberton." His voice shifted back to business mode. "What do you mean the servers are down?" A pause. "All of them? That's impossible." Asha started to step toward the door, assuming the conversation would be private, but he held up a hand to stop her. "How long for the backup systems?" he was saying. 6 hours? That's unacceptable. We have trades executing, positions to monitor. His voice grew sharper. "I don't care if it's Saturday. Get the emergency team in there now." He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. "Rebecca? It's James. We have a situation. The entire server farm is down, and I need to monitor the Asian markets opening in 2 hours. Asha watched him transform from the man who'd been testing her integrity into someone genuinely worried about a business catastrophe. His confidence cracked slightly, revealing something more human underneath. "No, I can't work from the backup office," he was saying. "All my analysis tools are on the home system." He paused, listening. "What do you mean the building's entire network is compromised?" When he hung up, he sat in silence for a moment, staring at his computer screen as if willing it to spring back to life. Then he looked at Asha, who was still standing awkwardly by the door. "I suppose you don't know anything about computer networks," he said, the words carrying more exhaustion than condescension. "Actually," Asha said slowly, "I might. I studied computer science before life changed my plans." His eyebrows rose. "You studied computer science?" 2 years at community college. I was working toward a degree in network administration when I got pregnant with Maya. She hadn't planned to share this information, but his genuine surprise loosened something in her chest. "I still keep up with it when I can. Online courses, mostly." James gestured toward his computer setup. 3 large monitors, multiple towers, a configuration that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Everything's frozen. I can't access anything remotely, and I have positions worth millions that need monitoring when the markets open." Asha moved closer to the desk, her professional instincts overriding her discomfort. "May I?" He nodded, rolling his chair back to give her access. She bent over the keyboard, her fingers moving quickly through diagnostic commands. The screens flickered as she navigated through system menus he probably didn't know existed. Your primary connection is down, but you have a secondary internet line that's still active, she said, her focus entirely on the technical problem. I can route your trading platform through that while we figure out what's wrong with the main system. You can do that? If you trust me with your passwords. The words came out before she could stop them, and they hung in the air with unexpected weight. James was quiet for a long moment. When she glanced at him, she found him studying her with that same analytical intensity, but this time it felt different, less like examination and more like recognition. The primary password is Meridian 2024, he said finally. Capital M, no spaces. As Asha's fingers flew across the keyboard, establishing new network pathways and rerouting his systems, she felt something shift in the room. For the first time since she'd started working here, she wasn't invisible. She was necessary, not as someone to clean up after him, but as someone who could solve a problem he couldn't. There, she said, stepping back as his monitors came alive with streaming market data. You should have full access now. James stared at the screens, then at her. How did you learn this? YouTube University, mostly. And necessity. She picked up her cleaning supplies. I'll let you get back to work. Wait, he said as she reached the door. I thank you. The words were simple, but something in his tone made her turn back. For the first time, she saw him not as her employer, but as a man genuinely grateful for help he hadn't expected to find. 3 hours later, the markets had stabilized and James's crisis had passed, but neither he nor Asha had returned to their usual dance of employer and invisible employee. She continued cleaning while he worked, but the dynamic had shifted. He asked her opinion about routing issues, and she suggested efficiency improvements for his backup systems. It was nearly 4 p.m. when James finally pushed back from his desk and rubbed his eyes. I owe you more than thanks, he said. That network rerouting probably saved me $2 million today. Asha was organizing his bookshelf, ensuring the financial texts were aligned perfectly. Just glad I could help. Where did you really learn all that? It wasn't just YouTube. She paused, her hand on a leather-bound volume about market theory. The question felt different from his earlier probing. Less interrogation, more genuine curiosity. I told you. Community college. But why computer science? Why not? He gestured vaguely, and she could hear the unfinished thought. Why not something more traditional for someone like you? Asha turned to face him fully. Because I was 17 and thought I could hack my way to a better life. Because I saw how the world was moving toward technology, and I wanted to be part of building it instead of just cleaning up after the people who did. What happened? Maya happened. She said it without bitterness, just fact. Her father disappeared when I told him I was pregnant. My parents. She paused, old pain flickering across her face. My parents said I'd made my choice and would have to live with it. So I dropped out, found work that paid immediately instead of eventually. James was quiet, his earlier analytical expression replaced by something softer. That must have been terrifying? Yeah. Asha moved to dust his desk, needing something to do with her hands. But I figured out pretty quickly that being scared was a luxury I couldn't afford. Maya needed food, diapers, and medical care. Dreams about computer networks seemed pretty abstract compared to keeping a baby alive. Do you regret it? The question caught her off guard. She looked at him, really looked, and saw genuine interest, not judgment. Which part? Having Maya or giving up school? Either. Both. I don't regret Maya for a second. She's. Asha smiled, the first truly unguarded expression he'd seen from her. She's everything good about me, plus things I never knew I could be. Smart, funny, brave in ways that terrify me. And school. I regret that the world made me choose. I regret that there wasn't a way to be both a good mother and a student. But I don't regret choosing her. James stood up, moving to the window where the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. I never had to choose between anything, he said quietly. Everything was always laid out for me, prep school, Harvard, family connections opening doors before I even knocked. That must have been nice. It was easy, he corrected. But easy isn't the same as nice. He turned back to her. When everything comes easily, you start to wonder what you've actually earned. What you're actually worth. Asha paused in her dusting. There was something in his voice she'd never heard before, uncertainty, maybe even vulnerability. My father built this company from nothing, James continued. Came from poverty, worked 18-hour days, clawed his way to success through sheer determination. He used to tell me stories about going without meals so he could buy textbooks, about wearing the same suit to interviews for months because it was the only one he owned. He sounds like a remarkable man. He was. And he was terrified that wealth would make me weak. So he tested me constantly, made me work summers at construction sites, cut off my allowance if my grades slipped, forced me to earn every privilege. James's voice carried an old hurt. But even his tests felt manufactured. I knew there was a safety net. I knew that if I really failed, the family money would catch me. Asha set down her cleaning cloth, sensing this confession was important in ways she didn't fully understand yet. When he died 3 years ago, James continued, he left me everything. But also a letter. He said his greatest fear wasn't that I'd lose the money, but that I'd never understand what it meant to be desperate enough to compromise my principles. He said wealth was a test I might never have the chance to fail. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. He said people would always want something from me, and I'd never know if anyone saw me as more than a bank account. That I'd spend my life wondering if kindness was genuine or calculated. Understanding dawned on Asha like cold water. The safe. James met her eyes. I needed to know. Know what? If someone could be desperate, really desperate, and still choose integrity. If someone could need money badly enough to justify taking it and still walk away. Asha felt something collapse inside her chest. Not anger this time, but something deeper and more painful. So I was right. It was a test. Yes. And the cameras recorded everything. Yes. She picked up her cleaning supplies, her movements sharp with renewed hurt. Well, congratulations. You got your data. The poor black woman passed your little experiment in human nature. Asha, wait. No. She turned on him, eyes flashing. You want to know what desperation looks like, Mr. Pemberton? It looks like choosing between your child's medicine and your electricity bill. It looks like checking your bank balance 3 times, hoping the numbers will magically change. It looks like lying awake calculating whether you can afford to get sick because you don't have health insurance. Her voice rose despite her efforts to control it. It looks like standing in a room with more money than you'll see in a lifetime, knowing your daughter is sick at school and you can't afford to take her to a doctor, and still choosing to do the right thing because that's who you are, not because some billionaire is watching to see if poor people have morals. James stood silent as her words hit him like physical blows. So yes, Asha said quietly, I passed your test. But the question is, did you? The silence that followed Asha's words felt fragile, like glass that might shatter if either of them moved too quickly. James stood by the window, his shoulders rigid with tension, while Asha gripped her cleaning supplies like armor against whatever came next. You're right, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I failed completely. Asha had expected defensiveness, justification, maybe dismissal. She hadn't expected this quiet admission that seemed to cost him something to say. I told myself I was testing your character, James continued, turning to face her. But really, I was testing whether my father was right about people. Whether desperation always wins over principle. Whether I could trust anyone to see me as more than a source of money. And now you know. Now I know that I'm exactly the kind of person my father was afraid I'd become. His laugh was bitter. Someone who uses his wealth as a weapon instead of a tool. Someone who creates tests instead of building trust. Asha set down her supplies slowly. Something in his tone had shifted. The careful control was cracking, revealing something raw underneath. Your father sounds like he was trying to prepare you for a hard world, she said carefully. Maybe. Or maybe he was so afraid of raising a weak son that he forgot to raise a decent one. James moved to his desk, picked up a framed photograph she'd noticed but never examined closely. This was taken the day he signed the papers to go public with the company. He's shaking hands with the banker who'd once refused him $1,000 loan. He handed her the frame. In the photo, a man who looked like an older version of James stood beaming next to a banker in an expensive suit. But it was the expression on the father's face that caught Asha's attention. Triumph mixed with something that looked almost like vindication. "He told me that story 100 times, James said. How that banker looked at his clothes, his accent, his empty bank account, and decided he wasn't worth the risk. How proving him wrong became the driving force behind everything he built. It must have felt good to prove them wrong. For him, maybe. But it also meant he spent 40 years expecting the worst from people. And he taught me to do the same." James took the photograph back, studying his father's face. "I've been so focused on protecting myself from being used that I never learned how to actually connect with anyone." Asha found herself sitting in the chair across from his desk without consciously deciding to. The formal boundary between employer and employee had dissolved, replaced by something more human. "Connection is scary," she said quietly. "It means giving someone the power to hurt you. How do you do it? Trust people when you have so much to lose." The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "Maya, you trust teachers with her education, doctors with her health, babysitters with her safety. Every day, you put the most important thing in your life in other people's hands." "How?" Asha considered this. "I guess because the alternative is worse. I could homeschool her, never let her out of my sight, protect her from everyone who might disappoint or hurt her. But then she'd never learn to navigate the world on her own. She'd never experience the good parts of trusting people. But what if they let her down? Then I help her understand that one person's failure doesn't mean everyone will fail her. That disappointment is part of life, but so is finding people who won't disappoint you." She paused. "It sounds like your father forgot that second part." James was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. "I can't remember the last time someone surprised me in a good way. Until today." "What do you mean?" "You could have taken that money. You had every reason to: sick daughter, overdue bills, an employer who clearly didn't value you as anything more than hired help. But you didn't." He met her eyes. "And when I needed help with something completely outside your job description, you didn't hesitate to offer it. You were in trouble. I could help. It wasn't complicated." "It wasn't complicated for you," he corrected. "For me, it was revolutionary. When was the last time someone helped me without wanting something in return? Without calculating what they might gain?" Asha felt something soften in her chest, a recognition of shared loneliness despite their vastly different circumstances. "You've been surrounded by the wrong people. I've been surrounded by people who want access to my money. There's a difference. Then maybe you need to change where you look for connection." "Where do you suggest?" "The country club where everyone inherited their membership. The charity galas where people compete to see who can write the biggest tax-deductible check." Despite everything, Asha smiled. "You could try places where people can't afford to pretend. Community centers. Volunteer organizations. Maya's school always needs reading tutors." "You think I'd be good with children?" "I think children are excellent at seeing through pretense. They don't care about your net worth. They care about whether you listen to them, whether you're kind, whether you show up when you say you will." James leaned back in his chair, something like wonder crossing his face. "I never thought about that. There's a whole world of people out there who would be happy to know you for who you are instead of what you have," Asha said. "But you have to be willing to show them who you are." "And who am I?" The question was asked so quietly she almost missed it. But the vulnerability in it, the genuine uncertainty of a man who'd built his identity around his wealth, made her heart ache. "You're someone who works 18-hour days because you inherited your father's drive. Someone who's never forgotten a detail about how I like to organize your space, even though you pretend not to notice. Someone who's lonely enough to test a stranger's honesty because you can't figure out how to trust anyone." She paused. "And someone who's brave enough to admit when he's wrong." For the first time since she'd known him, James Pemberton smiled, not the controlled expression he wore for business meetings, but something genuine and surprised, as if he'd forgotten what real warmth felt like. How do we learn to trust others when we've been taught to expect the worst? And what does genuine connection require from both people? The moment shattered at 6:47 p.m., with the sound of the penthouse door opening and a woman's voice calling out in practiced familiarity. "James? Darling, I know you're here. Your doorman said you came up hours ago." Asha and James both froze. They'd been talking for over 2 hours, the conversation flowing from professional to personal in ways that felt both natural and impossible. She'd told him about Maya's dreams of becoming a veterinarian, and he'd shared stories about his father that revealed wounds still healing. The space between them had filled with something fragile and new, understanding, maybe even the beginning of trust. Now, hearing that cultured voice echoing through the penthouse, Asha watched James's face transform. The openness disappeared behind familiar walls, his expression shuddering as he returned to the controlled persona she'd known for 6 months. "Victoria," he said quietly, more to himself than to Asha. Then louder, in the study. Footsteps clicked across marble floors, expensive heels on expensive stone. Asha quickly stood, grabbing her cleaning supplies, but James gestured for her to wait. "Stay," he said. "Please." Before Asha could respond, a woman appeared in the doorway. Victoria was exactly what Asha had expected. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in clothes that cost more than most people's rent. Her gaze swept the room, taking in James behind his desk and Asha standing awkwardly with her cleaning bucket. "Oh," Victoria said, her tone shifting to something cooler. "I didn't realize you were working." "Victoria, this is Asha Williams." "Asha Victoria Huntington." Victoria's smile was perfectly practiced, never reaching her eyes. "Of course. The cleaning woman. I'm sure you do lovely work." The dismissal was subtle but complete, a recognition of Asha's existence followed by immediate categorization as unimportant. Asha had experienced it thousands of times, but after the past 2 hours of genuine conversation with James, it stung more than usual. "I should go," Asha said, moving toward the door. "Let you too." "Actually," Victoria interrupted, settling into the chair Asha had just vacated with the confidence of someone reclaiming territory. "We need to talk privately. James and I have some things to discuss." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a tablet, swiping it open with practiced efficiency. "I've been reviewing the Meridian acquisition documents, and there are some concerns about the timeline that—" "How did you get those documents?" James's voice carried a sharp edge that made both women look at him. Victoria blinked, momentarily thrown by his tone. "Darling, don't be silly. My firm represents 3 of the investors in the consortium. Of course I have access to the preliminary filings. Those filings are confidential until Tuesday's announcement, yes. But surely you don't think I'd use insider information inappropriately." Victoria's laugh was like crystal breaking. "I'm simply making sure our interests align before the public announcement." Asha felt the temperature in the room drop. She'd been around wealthy people long enough to recognize the undercurrents of power and manipulation, but this felt different, more personal, more poisonous. "Our interests?" James repeated slowly. "Well, yes. Once we're married, your success becomes my success. It only makes sense for me to be involved in major decisions." Victoria's fingers moved across the tablet screen. "Actually, I've been thinking we should formalize my role in your investment strategy. A prenup that includes partnership provisions might be—" "We're not engaged, Victoria." The words fell into the room like stones into still water. Victoria's fingers stilled on the tablet, her perfectly composed expression flickering for just a moment. "Not yet," she said carefully. "But we've been discussing it, and with the Meridian deal positioning you for the Forbes list, the timing seems calculated." Asha wanted to disappear, to melt into the walls and avoid witnessing this dissolution. But she was trapped between the door and Victoria's chair, invisible again but for all the wrong reasons. "James," Victoria's voice took on a wounded quality. "I don't understand why you're being so hostile. We're a team." We've always been a team. Have we? James stood up, moving to the window where he'd stood earlier while confessing his loneliness to Asha. Or have you been positioning yourself for when my net worth hits the right threshold? That's unfair and you know it. Victoria's mask slipped further, revealing something harder underneath. I've invested 2 years in this relationship. 2 years of accompanying you to boring charity events, pretending to care about your tedious business stories, putting up with your paranoia about people's motives. Asha flinched. The casual cruelty in Victoria's words, the reduction of James's fears about trust to paranoia, the description of their relationship as an investment, felt like watching someone twist a knife in a wound she'd been helping to heal. 2 years, James repeated. Is that how you measure it? Like a business venture with expected returns? Don't be dramatic. I'm simply being practical about our future. Our future? James turned from the window, and Asha saw something cold and final in his expression. There is no future, Victoria. There never was. There was just you, waiting for the right moment to cash in. Victoria stood abruptly, her composure cracking completely. Cash in? How dare you? I could have any man in this city. I chose you despite your trust issues and your ridiculous tests and your complete inability to connect with another human being. The words hit James like physical blows, but it was the last phrase that made Asha's hands clench into fists. She'd spent the past 2 hours witnessing his capacity for connection, seeing the vulnerable man beneath the wealth, understanding his struggle to trust. You're right, James said quietly. You could have any man in the city. So go find one. Victoria gathered her things with sharp, angry movements. At the doorway, she turned back, her gaze landing on Asha with sudden, vicious focus. Enjoy playing therapist to broken billionaires, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Just remember, you're still the help. Whatever fantasy you've been entertaining today, that's all it is. A fantasy. Then she was gone, her heels clicking away across the marble, the front door slamming with enough force to rattle the windows. The silence that followed felt like the aftermath of an explosion. James stood frozen by the window, and Asha remained clutched to her cleaning supplies, both of them staring at the empty doorway. I should go, Asha whispered. When James turned to look at her, his face had closed off completely, not just from Victoria, but from everything, including her. The walls were back up, higher than before. Yes, he said, his voice empty. You should. Asha made it as far as the subway platform before she stopped walking. The 6 train pulled into the station, its doors sliding open with a mechanical hiss. Commuters flowed around her, people heading home from late shifts, couples dressed for Saturday night dinners, teenagers with earbuds drowning out the world. She should get on. She should go home to Maya, help with homework, pretend this day had been like any other. Instead, she let the train leave without her. Victoria's words echoed in her mind. You're still the help. Whatever fantasy you've been entertaining today, that's all it is. The cruel accuracy of it burned. What had she been thinking? That 2 hours of genuine conversation could bridge the gap between their worlds? That a man who tested her integrity with stacks of cash would suddenly see her as an equal? But then she remembered the look on James's face when Victoria had twisted his fears about trust into character flaws. The way he'd quietly admitted his failures. The surprise and wonder when she'd suggested he could find real connection if he was willing to be vulnerable. Enjoy playing therapist to broken billionaires. Is that what she'd been doing? Playing therapist? Or had she been doing something more dangerous, allowing herself to hope that someone might finally see her as more than her circumstances? Her phone buzzed. A text from her neighbor who watched Maya after school. She's fine, but fever's up to 101. Gave her medicine. Come when you can. 101 degrees. Asha closed her eyes, calculating. The emergency room would mean a $500 bill she couldn't pay. Urgent care might be cheaper, but still beyond her reach. And Monday, Maya would need to see a real doctor, not just get Band-Aid treatment. She thought about the open safe, the money that could solve everything. Then she thought about James's face when he'd realized Victoria had been calculating their relationship like a business transaction. Money changes everything, she realized. Even when you don't take it. The next train arrived, and again she didn't board. Around her, the platform emptied and filled, while she stood frozen between going home and… what? Going back. To say what? 42 floors above Manhattan, James stood in his study staring at the closed safe, his reflection ghosted in its black surface. The penthouse felt enormous and empty, filled with expensive things that meant nothing, silence that pressed against his eardrums like physical weight. Victoria's tablet lay abandoned on his desk, still open to the Meridian documents. He picked it up, scrolled through the analysis she'd prepared. It was thorough, insightful, exactly the kind of strategic thinking that would have impressed him 3 hours ago. Now it felt like evidence of calculation, every bullet point a small betrayal of whatever trust he'd been building. Your complete inability to connect with another human being. The words stung because they felt true. When was the last time he'd had a genuine conversation with another person? When did someone last surprise him with kindness instead of strategy? Today. This afternoon. With Asha. But Victoria was right about one thing. Asha was still the help. He was still the boss. The power imbalance made any connection between them suspect, didn't it? How could he trust that her kindness wasn't strategic, her understanding of anything more than professional service performed exceptionally well? The security system chimed, indicating someone had entered the building. James checked his phone, 7:23 p.m. His doorman would have called if someone unexpected was coming up. Unless… He moved to the intercom. Richard? Who's coming up? Ms. Williams, sir. She said she forgot something in your study. James's heart did something complicated in his chest. Send her up. He waited by the elevator, uncertainty and hope warring in his stomach. When the doors opened, Asha stepped out looking determined and terrified in equal measure. I didn't forget anything, she said without preamble. I know. I came back because Victoria was wrong about some things, but right about others. James gestured toward the living room, but Asha shook her head. I'll say this here, and then I'll leave, and we can both pretend this day ended differently. She took a breath. Victoria was right that I'm the help. I clean your house for $20 an hour because I need the money and you need the service. That's reality. Asha. But she was wrong about the fantasy part. What happened this afternoon wasn't fantasy. It was two people recognizing something real in each other. Her voice grew stronger. You're not broken, James. You're careful. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Broken means you can't be fixed. Careful means you've learned to protect yourself, but you're still capable of choosing trust when someone proves they deserve it. James felt something tight in his chest beginning to loosen. And you? What are you? Tired, she said simply. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being underestimated. Tired of pretending that circumstances define character. She paused. But not tired enough to accept less than I deserve. What do you deserve? The same thing you do. To be seen for who I am, not what I have or don't have. To be trusted until I prove I shouldn't be. To connect with someone who values my mind as much as my kindness. The silence stretched between them, charged with possibility and risk. Maya's fever is getting worse, Asha continued. I need to take her to a doctor, which means I need to figure out how to pay for it. But I came back here first because I wanted you to know Victoria was wrong about my motivations. I didn't help you today because I wanted something from you. I helped you because you needed help and I could give it. James moved closer, his heart hammering. What if I wanted to help Maya? Not as charity, but as someone who cares about both of you. Then I'd probably let you, Asha said quietly. Not because I need your money, but because accepting help from someone who genuinely cares isn't the same as being bought. And if I wanted more than that, if I wanted to know you better, spend time with you, see where this connection might lead. Asha met his eyes directly. Then you'd have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone. Meet me in my world sometimes, not just invite me into yours. Be James the person, not James the billionaire. And you? I'd have to risk believing that someone could see past my circumstances to who I really am. That connection isn't about matching bank accounts. It's about matching hearts. James reached into his pocket and pulled out his car keys. Would you let me drive you to the hospital? No conditions, no expectations. Just because Maya needs help, and I'd like to help. Asha studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, I'd like that. As they walked toward the elevator together, James felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The terrifying, exhilarating possibility of real connection with someone who saw him clearly, flaws and all, and chose to trust him anyway. 6 months later, Asha arrived at the penthouse carrying Maya's science fair project, a working model of a computer network that she'd helped design, complete with blinking LED lights that showed data packets traveling between nodes. Mom, are you sure Mr. James will want to see this? Maya asked as they rode the elevator up. Her cough had been gone for months, thanks to the specialist who'd finally diagnosed and treated her chronic bronchitis, but she still sometimes seemed amazed by the changes in their lives. He asked to see it, didn't he? Asha smiled, adjusting the carefully balanced project in her arms. Besides, you know how much he loves hearing about your coding classes. The elevator opened to reveal James waiting for them, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, a far cry from the formal suits he'd worn during their early interactions. His face lit up when he saw them. These are my favorite programmers, he said, reaching out to steady the science project. Maya, this looks incredible. Tell me how the packet routing works. As Maya launched into an enthusiastic explanation of TCP/IP protocols that would have impressed most computer science professors, Asha watched James listen with genuine fascination. He asked thoughtful questions, celebrated Maya's innovations, and treated her 8-year-old insights with the same respect he'd given to a colleague's presentation. 3 months ago, he'd started volunteering at Maya's school as a reading tutor. 2 months ago, he'd funded a computer lab for the community center where Asha had been taking night classes to finish her degree. Last month, he'd quietly established a scholarship program for single parents pursuing technology education. None of it had been grand gestures or public philanthropy. Everything had been personal, quiet, focused on the people and places that mattered to Asha and Maya. Mom helped me with the network topology, Maya was saying, but I figured out the LED sequencing all by myself. That's amazing, James said, and Asha could tell he meant it. You know, my company's always looking for talented programmers. Maybe in about 10 years, you could come work for me. Maya giggled. By then, I'll probably have my own company. Even better, maybe I can come work for you. Watching them together, Asha felt the familiar warmth that had become the foundation of whatever this relationship was becoming. They'd never formally defined it, this careful dance between friendship and something deeper, between her world and his, between the practical realities of their different circumstances and the growing certainty that what they'd built together was real. How about we set this up in the study so you can show me how it works? James suggested it to Maya. I have something I want to show both of you too. In the study, the same room where everything had started with an open safe and a test of character, James had cleared space on a side table for Maya's project. But what caught Asha's attention was what else had changed. The formal business photos had been replaced with pictures of him volunteering at the school, of the 3 of them at Maya's birthday party, of quiet moments that looked like family. Okay, Maya said, connecting the final cables, watch this. Her project came to life, lights blinking in careful sequence as simulated data traveled through her miniature network. James watched with the same attention he'd once reserved for million-dollar trades. That's brilliant, he said. You've essentially created a visual representation of how the internet works. Do you know how revolutionary that kind of educational tool could be? What do you mean? Maya asked. I mean, what if we could mass-produce something like this? Help kids all over the country understand computer networks by building them instead of just reading about them. Asha saw the spark in his eyes, the same intensity he brought to business ventures, but directed toward education, toward Maya's future, toward making something meaningful. Would you want to help me figure out how to make that happen? He asked Maya. We could be business partners. Williams and Pemberton Educational Technologies. Williams first. Maya asked with 8-year-old practicality. Absolutely. It's your invention. Maya looked at her mother, eyes wide with possibility. Asha nodded, her throat tight with emotion she couldn't quite name. But first, James said, I have something to ask both of you. He moved to his desk and picked up an envelope Asha hadn't noticed before. Her name was written on it in his careful handwriting. Asha, I know we've been taking things slowly, figuring out how to build something real between two very different worlds. But I wanted you to know that this, he gestured to encompass the three of them, the comfortable intimacy of the moment, this is the most real thing in my life. He handed her the envelope. Inside was a legal document, but not the kind she'd expected. It's a partnership agreement, he explained. 50-50 ownership in a new company. James Pemberton Educational Technologies. Maya's network project would be our first product, but the company would be ours to build together. Equal partners, equal decision-making, equal ownership. Asha stared at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. James, I can't. You can't do what? Accept a business partnership with someone who respects your intelligence? Work with someone who's seen you solve problems I couldn't handle? Build something meaningful with someone who... He paused, looking at both her and Maya. With someone who's taught me what family actually feels like. Are you asking Mom to marry you? Maya asked with characteristic directness. James laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. I'm asking your mom to be my partner in every way that matters. In business, in life, in figuring out how to blend our families. Because that's what we are now, isn't it? A family. Asha looked around the study where 6 months ago she'd faced the choice between desperation and integrity. The safe was still there, still closed, but it no longer represented a test. Now it was just a piece of furniture in a room where trust had grown slowly, carefully, into something unshakable. Equal partners? She asked. In everything. And Maya gets to be our first employee? Chief Technology Officer, James corrected solemnly. Once she finishes elementary school. Maya bounced on her toes. Can I tell everyone at school that I'm going to be a CTO? You can tell everyone you already are one, Asha said, signing the partnership agreement with steady hands. Because this is happening. As Maya cheered and James smiled the kind of smile that reached his eyes and stayed there, Asha realized that the real test hadn't been whether she'd take money from an open safe. The real test had been whether both of them could choose vulnerability over protection, trust over suspicion, love over fear. They'd both passed. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating three people who'd found each other across impossible odds and built something neither money nor circumstances could diminish. A partnership rooted in respect, strengthened by challenge, and held together by the rarest of all treasures, unconditional acceptance of who they really were. What would change in your life if you measured relationships by mutual respect and genuine care, rather than by conventional expectations or social boundaries?